native of Clearwater, Florida. She is, of course, an Auburn graduate, majoring in, then it was called radio, television, and film. Today it's called media studies. Ms. Denson's had such an interesting career. She recently accepted a position as the Main Street Director in Opelika, which will promote everything that is historic and wonderful and traditional about Opelika and their downtown and their venues and all that's going on there. But in addition, she is the founder and co-owner of Tealish Dressings and Marinades. And it was really interesting that Ms. Denson just started making these as gifts for friends, and then someone approached her in 2009 and said, well, would you consider actually putting this in a retail market? And by December of 2010, she tried it in one store, and within a month sold 1,700 jars from just this one little attempt. And by December of 2011, she had branched out to many retail stores. Today, not only are her products found online, but at stores like Publix and Whole Foods and Piggly Wiggly and Western and all over the Southeast. So please join me in welcoming Mrs. Tiffany Denson. And our second panelist is Mr. Michael Waller, and currently he's special counsel for the firm of Hunton & Williams in Washington, D.C. Mr. Waller, also an Auburn graduate, majored in psychology, and after finishing his degree at Auburn, studied law in Houston, Texas. Prior to joining his current position for 13 years, he was executive vice president. He was the general counsel and general secretary for the Delhaize Group, which was a Belgium-based operator of retail food stores. They had stores in 8 countries and 3 continents. And over Mr. Waller's extremely interesting career, he has lived and worked in the United States, Russia, London, Belgium, and Indonesia. And I'm so excited today that you're going to get to hear more about all that Mr. Waller has done with his amazing career. Please welcome Mr. Michael Waller. And our moderator today is our very own Associate Dean of the College of Liberal Arts, Dr. Charles Israel. And so now it is my pleasure to turn our class today over to Dr. Israel, Mrs. Denson, and Mr. Waller. Please be preparing questions as you listen today, and they would love to have a time for questions at the end. I'm going to ask that everyone close their laptop right now and their phones, and I know you have a worksheet that has some questions, and I hope you'll be taking some notes on that, but let's give our attention to our panelists today.
Thank you, Dr. Teal. And we're going to have to do sort of microphone dance here as we go today. We're hoping that we'll have a second one. We've asked our 2 panelists to do a short introduction, and we've given them a couple of questions in advance that we thought would be of interest to you all, but we've saved a fair amount of the class time for your questions. So we do hope that when you hear things, or if you have questions that you brought with you, that you'll be prepared to ask those. Did you all flip coins and figure out who's going first?
Tiffany first.
Doesn't matter to me.
Does she know that?
Right?
She has a deeper Auburn pedigree.
Well, I would say that. Good morning. How are y'all? I feel very underqualified to be sitting next to Mr. Waller, but I graduated Auburn in '95 and never dreamed that I would be sitting in front of a classroom with any sort of wisdom or advice. But anyway, I graduated in '95, and at that point I worked for ESPN 2 as a set director. Those were very long days for short stints. It was a really exhausting time, but it was fun back in my 20s. But then I got married to a man who was from Opelika, very large Auburn pedigree. My son's coming here next year, will be 5th generation. Thank God he almost went to Tuscaloosa, but that did not happen. But anyway, we moved here when we got married, and I actually was the Main Street director for Opelika at 23 years old. So that was one of my first jobs out of college. In all honesty, I'm that embarrassing girl on bid day when I introduced myself as I'm Tiffany Quinn from Clearwater, Florida, and I'm here to get my MRS degree. My mother was mortified, and I, honest to God, never dreamed that I would take the path I have, but that's life, isn't it, right? You never typically go where you plan to go. So anyway, I started having children a few years into marriage. We moved back to Florida, and then my husband had the opportunity to buy a real estate brokerage in Birmingham, Alabama. So we moved there in 2006, and I was a stay-at-home mom with 2 boys, and y'all were awfully young probably, but the market crashed in 2009, and it was tough. And my husband called me one day and said, "Hey babe, you gotta lean things up. Like, you gotta get rid of the babysitters." And I thought, well, I don't really work well with anybody, so I'm not gonna go get a job. So I'll just try to work a bunch of little jobettes and piece things together. And remind you, he was a broker, so he couldn't leave what he was doing to go make an income for our family. So really it was up to me. So I worked 4 jobs tirelessly, and one of them was making this dressing that I gave as Christmas gifts in the past that people really loved. And I sold it in a clothing store called the Pants Store, if anybody knows Pants Store in Birmingham, Alabama. And I, within 3 months, was selling 900 jars, mason jars of this little product. And I kind of thought, maybe I'm onto something, I don't know. My house smelled perpetually like garlic. My kids were like, "Oh God, Mom, seriously?" But my kids would tag it at night, I'd make it all day, and it was paying the bills. Like, it literally kept us afloat and kept us from losing our home. And I'm a girl that never dreamed that would even be a situation that I'd be in, but it's really what you do in those moments that define who you are as a human being. What do you do when you fail? What happens when things go bad? It's really, we can all do well in the peaks and the mountains, but it's what happens when you get to the valley. So I pulled up my big girl pants, and I supported my family the best I could. So anyway, from that point, I went into Whole Foods markets, just a few in the region, and then about 2 years later, I was in 3,000 stores with 5 products. So it was one of those journeys I never dreamt I would take. The food business is a hard one to be in. I don't care if it's restaurants, grocery retail, or food. Yet everybody wants to quit their job and they have a pound cake or a salsa that they make. I always say, give me $20,000 and I just saved you a whole lot of headache. You know, in this day and age, $1 to $2 million is nothing in investment. So anyway, we can get more into that later, but that's kind of my story. And what I did, I recently entered into a trademark licensing agreement, so I just get royalties now at this point. I'm still a little bit involved. I own the brand. I've kind of got the best of both worlds. I get a check, but at the end of the day, the people that use my trademark can't sell it without me. So hopefully at some point that'll pay off substantially for maybe even my kids, who knows. But anyway, and now I'm back doing the Main Street director job for Opelika because I love Opelika, and it was imploding, and it's a part-time job, and so I thought I love to work. So I'm trying to get them back on track right now. So anyway, we'll see how that goes. But I will turn it over to Mr. Waller and let him kind of tell you a little bit about him.
I think this works.
Oh.
Does this work?
Doesn't sound like it here.
Great.
We thought it did.
Thank God we live in a country that encourages entrepreneurship, and for those of you who've studied business even a little bit know that the number of businesses that fail far exceeds those that succeed, and so you know how humbling it is for me to be sitting next to Tiffany on this stage. It's hard work, and congratulations on doing something that is really difficult. And I came to Auburn in 1971, and my experience in choosing what I would study and what field I would enter into when this building was new bears little resemblance of anything that you will encounter, because the world you are entering is a lot different than the world I entered. And long gone are the days where you could major in a business or accounting or something and then graduate into a job that you repeated over the course of a 30-year career. Those days are gone. But what I tried to do is reflect on my career and perhaps distill out a few lessons that I learned along the way which may have withstood the test of time. I came to Auburn intent upon being a medical doctor. and my grades in organic chemistry and my experience shadowing a cousin of mine who was a physician at the Mayo Clinic taught me that words were going to be better than chemistry and blood for at least my career. And the lesson there is spend a little bit of time getting to know yourself and aligning your aspirations with your innate ability. It'll go a lot smoother for you. That fascination with words led me to law school, and I graduated when the country was just coming out of a pretty severe energy crisis in the 1970s, and so I was in Texas, and the energy industry was a natural place for me to land. What was energy for me, data is for you. If you think about knowing the world that you're entering into, understanding that as part of your context and what you decide to do is an important lesson to learn. One of my mentors, as I was maturing as a lawyer in my law firm in the early years, was Ambassador Bob Strauss. Bob was a longtime Democratic politician and the first U.S. trade representative and the only person to serve as the U.S. ambassador to both the USSR and to Russia. He took me under his wing, and as he left his ambassadorship to come back to the United States, he saw a business opportunity for us to open an office in Moscow, and he was looking for someone to open that office for our firm, and he came to me and asked me if I would be interested in that. And I told him, I said, Bob, you're out of your mind. I have no idea where Russia is on the map. I have no experience in this. You're off. Go find somebody else. He said, no, you know energy, and you know people, and I'll be with you. You'll be fine. And so off I went. That led me from Moscow to London, and some very interesting experiences there we can talk about later. But in the year 2000, a client came to the firm and said that we need somebody to serve as our chief legal officer and to manage our government affairs and legal affairs worldwide, and we need somebody that has some experience but knows nothing about our industry. Their industry happened to be food retail, a very low margin business, as you are well aware of, Tiffany. But they wanted to add some interdisciplinary experience to their senior leadership team. And so, again, I was qualified by what I didn't know as much as what I did know. And that led to a very enriching 13-year career. And ultimately, I learned enough about food retail to take on the role of Chief Executive Officer of our operations in Indonesia, which was relatively small. It was about $1 billion business in 140 stores around that country, but it was an area that in which I learned a lot. And so as you think about that career in the context of what you're about to do, two more lessons come out of that for me that I think. One, don't underestimate the value of mentoring and job shadowing. Those two elements can help inform you and support you in areas that will be helpful to you down the road. Also, be careful. Don't assume that you know what your experience you're about to have is going to teach you and where it will lead you. I like to say, show up and play in traffic, because the experiences that you have in any opportunity, embrace those for what they are, not because you think it will teach you something that you want to do 10 years from now. Engage in it, learn from it, because the world is, and the context around you is dynamic. It's changing each and every day, quicker, much quicker than when I entered the workforce. And I can tell you, if you do that, the opportunities will come.
All right. Thank you. I'll just project it. Can you hear me in the back? Okay. So we gave our panelists a series of questions to start with, and actually in your introductions I heard much of the answer to the first one, so I'm going to combine the first and second in a way. You're both here because you've been successful in your careers. And we have a bunch of folks who are launching out in the next year or the next 3 years into that sort of unknown period. And I'd like you all to reflect a little bit on the role of preparation and the role of chance in what has come out of your career so far. And that may be about, the first question was about your major connecting into career, but that would be a form of preparation. How have those affected what you have done and what you have achieved? And I'll let you all arm wrestle again for the...
Okay, so the relative weight of experience, the preparation and experimentation, back to better term. Everybody's going to tell you this, you'll hear it at graduation ceremonies and from your parents and everybody else, but there is no substitution for hard work and paying attention and showing up and diving in. It's a lesson that I saw play out in ways that led to disasters and in ways which led to success. I wish I could say that I had a plan for what I just described to you, but I didn't. But what I did do is I found that curiosity was my fuel. You'd be surprised at the answers that CEOs get to questions that they pose to job applicants. Are you smart or do you work hard? More than 60% of the applicants to the CEO surveyed in this particular article said that people said, I'm pretty smart. I don't have to work that hard. Which was surprising to me because I've never been smart, so I've always had to work hard. But, I would say, wring everything out of the experiences that you have, but because you don't know where it's going to lead. Chance, yes, it happens. The energy crisis, but having a mentor who was a U.S. ambassador, I didn't plan for any of that, and so those chances, I guess, tend to translate into good luck for those who prepare. So I'd say, do a little bit of both and keep scanning around you for mentors and learning opportunities that you have, because you never know where that's going to lead you.
I couldn't agree with him more. Good news is I actually was going to be a nutrition major and failed chemistry. So I had a liberal arts major. And people always say, what do you do with liberal arts? It's kind of a degree to do a little bit of everything and a whole lot of nothing, right? And I think that I hear that, but I don't agree with that. I think if you're a liberal arts major, you need to realize how important it is to collaborate with those around you. Never be too prideful not to learn. And I wish that I'd done a better job at putting mentors around me. If any of you decide to take the entrepreneurial route, buckle up. It's going to be a long and hard ride. It's not easy. And I would say this, when it comes time to find investors, if you ever get in that situation, try to find people who understand your field and can pour that knowledge and wisdom into you. I think that we tend to think that things come quick. We're going to graduate, we're going to get a job, we're going to make money. And I would just say to you, like he said, really hone in on your experiences and the people around you. I don't believe in mistakes. If it wasn't for the real estate market crash in 2009, I would never have started my company. I never saw that coming. It's what you do in the difficulties that really translate into your success in life. Again, I can't stress. I say to my kids every day, tell me what you failed at today. Because I believe your failures are what define you. It's going to make you or break you. So it's really what you do with those failures that can translate into your biggest successes and really enrich you. None of you here exist for yourself. Not one person. You exist to serve other people, and you exist to pour your journey and your life into everyone around you. I think it's really important to remember. So sometimes, like the difficult moments, and I've been with a challenging one formally, but I'm like, if all that I'm going through is to help one of you not have to endure that or to change the perception, then it's all worth it. So really, really treasure those moments in life, and don't look at anything. Don't expect to get out of college and it's just all going to be bliss. I always tease my mom, you said you didn't tell me what kids was going to be like. You didn't tell me what marriage was going to be like. And no one really told me what the real world would be like. And I kind of think, thank God, right? Ignorance is a little bliss. But be prepared, but be flexible. And don't be prideful. Always learn from those around you, because everybody has something to pour into you or you can learn from. So I would definitely say, liberal arts majors, I think one great thing is, different from other colleges, is y'all have more of an opportunity to collaborate. As a leader, I think the number one thing as a leader is, sometimes we think leaders are dictators. Those are the worst leaders in life. The best leaders, you know what they do? They listen. They listen to the people around them. And the best leaders are the ones that realize they're only as good as those around them. So never consider yourself better than anybody around you, and really, really, really hone into that and listen to the people around you, because you'll go a lot further in life collaborating, listening, than you are pushing your own agendas. Sometimes we have to do that, but really listen to those around you.
Thanks to you both, great answers. And I think you've again touched on bits of this, but if you could tell 20-year-old self, think back to yourself sort of in this room at the time, is there anything that you wish you had known or done differently at that time? And then here's sort of an opportunity, if you could tell yourself at age 20 something, what would it be?
I would say take life a little more seriously. At 20, I wasn't thinking the way I think now. And I think a lot of that just comes with progression of time and the more maturity that you have. But I would say, leaning onto what you said, I would job shadow. I would get in places and really, really learn from people. We have a lot to teach. We've been through a lot of things. And I think that I would have done more of that. I would have taken more time to really listen to people, to really get some more experience. And it, not necessarily in the field that you think that you're going in. I mean, sometimes this is what, life throws curveballs left and right, so you've got to be flexible, but learn from those you're around. So I think I would have done more in the interning part of what I did, and I think I probably would have sacrificed and said, you know what, I'm not going to take a pay this summer if I can sit in that position and really absorb what that person has to teach me. I mean, sometimes we have to make money, but I'm just saying I would really spend time just really taking in those sort of things. And I also would have done a better job collaborating with my classmates on projects. There's always that one person in the project that basically does the project. I feel like maybe sometimes y'all probably don't know what I'm talking about. I'm kidding, I'm sure you do. But really, you know, consider yourself, if you're that person that takes charge on that project, really try to engage with the people in your group. Get them to engage back with you. Try to understand who they are as people, and just really learn to collaborate, because I think out of collaboration comes the best creations. So try to get people engaged is, I think, what was really important.
I'll build on what Tiffany said there, Charles, in a couple of respects. Context is my one-word answer to your question. What do I mean by that? Over the last 10 years, any one of you can be a filmmaker or a reporter by virtue of the cell phone you have in your hand. You can connect with people that you have long lost in your family. You can call a taxi with a punch of a button, and you can order anything, anytime. In the last 6 months, we have a person dead in Tucson as a result of self-driving car accident. We have data being harvested from Facebook and used for nefarious purposes, let's put it that way. We have facial recognition being used in China to control the population. Some commentators today are saying we need to hit the pause button here and think a little bit about how we apply that technology to the lives that we live. And what is going to make the difference? Well, the difference is going to be having people at that intersection who have a good sense and a core set of values that they can apply to help us move ourselves into the second and third inning of the technological innovation that's going on around us. I would encourage you to think about yourselves as change makers. What do I mean by that? Problem finders are a lot cheaper than problem solvers. The liberal arts disciplines, broadly speaking, I think, and by the way, just a PS here, you need to spend some time over at the business school and learn how to read a financial statement, and you need to learn how to code. So beyond that, the liberal arts disciplines can add depth and breadth to what I call STEMpathy jobs. S-T-E-M and then empathy and STEM together. So you need to be able to see the patterns around you, identify the problems, solve the problems, build teams, like Tiffany was saying, organize them and lead collective action and continually adapt. And, you know, with those kind of skills, you can solve a lot of issues. A really good book you might want to take a look at is a book called Powerful by Patty McCord. She was the Chief Talent Officer at Netflix. Anybody heard of Netflix, right? Heard of it? Started off as a DVD distribution company. You know what happened to that business. They were sitting around the table thinking about how to develop content to serve their new audiences. And somebody realized, gosh, if we're successful in what we do here, we will consume 1/3 of the entire bandwidth available worldwide. We've got a different kind of problem than we did modifying our business model. So they had to adapt. You know what they've done at that company that makes it a very interesting place to work is that they don't do annual performance reviews. They tossed out the human resource function that was traditionally in place there, and they said, what we think people value, you people, is working on big problems with people that are smart, that can help contribute to things in ways that solve the big problems. That's where the creative juice is, that's where the energy is. And, you know, just think about yourself being meaningful and engaged in that kind of environment and aware of the context in which you are engaged in, not only in this country, but, you know, we're interconnected now. It's not just global. We are interconnected everywhere. It's here to stay. I don't care what you hear out of Washington. But it's here to stay, and there are opportunities there for people who are aware.
You've both talked in some ways about the opportunities of internships and job shadowing and getting that type of practical experience. Thoughts or tips on the best ways that you have been approached, or maybe the opposite ways, or thoughts of approaching people for these opportunities, for our students who are hopefully engaged in thinking about internship opportunities or job shadowing, experiences that you've had that went well, and others, tips that you might provide.
I currently have an intern, and she's fantastic. I don't know what I'll do without her. I actually had 2 interviews last week with potential interns. And I will say, walk in confident. It's so important. I think that one thing that we have lacked, and y'all may be doing this now, but when I was a student, one thing that we lacked was really preparing for interviews. It's a really important aspect, because I don't care how smart you are, it's really all about how you come across in an interview. Your resume may be great, and I think that's a lot of the PR problem, a lot of the HR problems is you'll get through because of your resume, but then you get to the interview and you don't interview well, and or opposite, you don't have the resume to match your personality. So I would just say, think about that, and don't underestimate the power of an interview. But you need to be confident yet humble in your approach, willing to listen to the person that's interviewing you, wanting to learn more. But I had a girl last week, and she was very sweet, but she was like, hi. Okay, I need more from you. I need to see like some confidence in your skill set and who you are. Your resume showed it, but you as a person did not show it in the interview. So I would say really, really, I know it's kind of cheesy, but practice interviewing. I mean, it really is important. Tape yourself, have someone tape you. Get with a peer group and really talk about how they're always going to ask you what's your weakness. There's certain questions, you be prepared for them. But I think just having a confidence in who you are and the ability to adapt and think about things in context, I think what we're both saying is collaboration, and we're better together than we are as a unit. In fact, there was a TED Talk, we talked about this at church yesterday, but a TED Talk, and I've heard it, they interviewed Harvard, interviewed 700. It was the longest, a 75-year research study. And out of that 75 years, successful people or people in general, the number one thing they said at the end of that 75 years was relationships is key to a successful life. So, and that's just in personal, but also in your job. So that's what I would say. But don't underestimate. Oh goodness, sorry about that. Technology, see?
To Apple.
But anyway, don't underestimate the interview and just show who you really are. Because your resume is one thing, but you have to shine. And so I want to know the best from you.
Building on a couple of things Tiffany said, in terms of looking for a mentor, Charles, I would say look for people around you that you know or have or connected with, through one or more people. Who do you admire? What do they do that you may aspire to? Just be aware of the connections that you have. Sometimes the people that are closest to you have experience that, if you think about it deeply enough, could be a great resource for you. So be aware of the context, understand more about what people are doing around you so that you can identify the opportunities that come along. Second, be open to what you will learn as a result of a mentorship, while also being educated a bit before you go into it. Leaders, need to be comfortable in ambiguity sometimes. And this CEO study I just referenced a little while ago said that one of the best questions that CEOs love to ask potential people come to work for them is, what do you like least and most about your parents? And one of these open-ended questions that some people are just stuck for an answer for, because it's nothing that they prepared for. They want to see how easy you are to engage, what kind of curiosity you have about that, where that conversation might lead. And so as you have those conversations with the mentors about job shadowing, be open about what you will learn ultimately and be relentlessly curious about it.
I would also say one last thing. Don't be afraid to reach out to people that you may or may not know. When I started my business in 2010 or 11, I called Patricia Barnes, Sister Schubert. I don't know her. She went to Auburn, so I just called her and said, I found out her secretary's name was. I tried to be really nice, and I got an appointment. I drove down there and I spent 3 hours just sitting at her feet, kind of learning from her. Sarah Blakely is one of my best friends. I grew up with her, that owns Spanx, started Spanx. I called Sarah and I said, Sarah, just talk to me. My point is, the people you meet, don't underestimate what they can do for you, and don't be afraid to reach out to them. There's reasons you meet people. I tell my kids all the time, you can come back to your pond one day, but you better go swim in an ocean. And realize that there's more out there than your small little world that you live in. So don't be afraid to reach out to people. I mean, I reached out to some people that were like, you just called Sister Schubert? I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, she'll want to talk to me. And then Sarah's a great friend of mine, so I called her, and her husband actually started Zico coconut waters with Coke, and I know him. And so anyway, you just don't, think about who you know and who you can reach out to, and be bold. Be bold.
All right, I'm hopeful that there are questions out here. So who has a question for our panel?
I guess this is mostly for Ms. Williams. Someone who's interested in foreign relations. How does one orient themselves in a new surrounding and relate to people who you might not even speak language with? What pitfalls have you made or seen made?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, no, okay, so to repeat the question, this student, your name?
Nathan.
Nathan is interested in foreign relations, and he wanted to know how do you go about preparing yourself for an adventure, I'd say, maybe a career in foreign relations. How do you go about orienting yourself, and what mistakes have I made that you could learn from? Well, that last part, the list is too long, but let me give you a few pointers. Number one is run as fast as you can away from the assumption that citizens in other countries view the world the same way you do. They don't. That's not bad, it's just different. And your job as a liberal arts major is to understand how it's different and why. Number 2, know in your bones, as deeply as you can know it, that history, culture, language, ethnicity, and geography all interact with one another in a very dynamic way that can lead you to experiences that you couldn't envision. And being able to adapt to that with that sort of background is important. I'll give you an example. I went to Indonesia, I was in my early 60s at that time, and here I was leading a workforce of 10,000 people, and maybe 20 of them spoke English. I spoke no Bahasa, which is the native language in Indonesia. And I had to figure out a way to lead 10,000 people without really knowing their language. And so I spent a fair amount of time understanding geography, history, culture, religion. Indonesia's 95% Muslim, as most of you know. It's to try to understand how that society operated. What was the hierarchy? How did people interact? What role did family play? All those sorts of things. And one thing I learned was that in Bahasa, there are 50 words for yes when you really mean no. And so as I would go around and talk about, we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to do that, and I got a lot of this, oh yes sir, because you don't say no to the CEO because that creates a tense situation. And the culture, Indonesian culture, prizes tranquility. And so the minute you raise your voice, almost like I'm raising it now, you lose every bit of effectiveness you have. And if you don't know that about the culture and you're not able to ask questions or give them an opportunity to ask questions in an environment that's safe for them, you're toast as a leader. Forget it. And so those are some examples of what I would lean into, but there's lots of schools and departments here in this college that will fuel you. Don't rule out geography or sociology or economics or all that, because they all play into how people feel.
Other questions?
One over here, Charles?
A question for Tiffany. I am going to be a public relations director, and I was just wondering, what was your favorite thing about being a journalist?
About being a journalist?
You repeat the question.
She's a PR major, and what's your name?
Actually,
Ashley. And what's my favorite part about being a journalist?
yes.
So I would just honestly say being relative and engaging with people is really awesome. I'm not the best writer, but I love creating content. I think content is super important for most of you. If you're going to own your own company or be in any sort of PR, content is so important. And so learn as much as you can about creating content. Content can get really expensive. I spent $35,000 last year in just photography for content, for food. But the most fun I ever had was in photo shoots and styling. And I never realized I would be a stylist. I worked with stylists from New York City and Atlanta for food styling and prop styling, but I learned a ton from them. So that was like a really fun part of my job, was to create content.
Another question. They're pointing back here. Yes, on the back.
So what advice would you have for someone who, the end goal is, to work for the Today Show or, be a broadcaster?
What advice would you give somebody who wants to end up working on the Today Show, other than being female?
Oh, being a female is fun in the workforce. I have a great friend who actually worked for Today Show. She started at David Letterman, and then she went to Today Show. I would say get as much experience as you can, and don't be afraid to start small. The reality is you can go after anything you want. It's going to be the connections you make. So put yourself in the situations that could lead, that the experience would lead to that. But in all honesty, I'd be careful to put an end goal like I want to be at Today's Show. Just see where life takes you. I mean, it really, you may end up there, and if that's where you're supposed to be, you will end up there. But know your skill set, know where you could be an asset to them. I don't care if your drive is to be at Today's Show or your drive is to create a product. What makes you different? What is your niche? Why do they need you? Okay, why do they need your products? Why do they need you? You got to really stand out. You guys have a very competitive society you're walking into. A lot more competitive than when I was in school. And the creative fields are only getting more and more saturated. So really, what makes you unique? But honest to God, it's really who you know and who you can get around. And I would say as much experience as you can, shadow as much as you can, get in the right places, and have a lot of faith and a lot of tenacity and don't give up. And it's really, that sounds kind of generic, but that's the reality. If you want to pursue a dream, you got to go after it.
One thing to add, I know nothing about the television business. There are people in this class, though, who do. Your job to find them. But understand how does the Today Show make money? Do enough research about the Today Show or NBC or Comcast and understand how they make money. And so when you learn the business model behind that, you can think more creatively about how you may plug into it in areas that may contribute something sooner rather than later.
No, great answers. And seeing as I don't think we can get one more question in a 3-minute period. Someone got a short question? We'll try it right here.
What's a trait that you'd say you look for if you saw anybody coming out of the College of Liberal Arts? Like, what do you think is important if you were hiring somebody?
What's a trait that you look for coming out of the College of Liberal Arts? I would say true life experience, perseverance, and confidence when you interview, and not being afraid to fail. The last thing I want to do is deal with someone who's afraid of failure and is afraid of admitting failure. I think that makes you stronger in the long run. And I will say this, if anybody out there wants to own their own business one day, be careful who you share your dreams with, because there's a lot of naysayers in this world. So I would say really hold those dreams tight to you. Talk to people who can build you up and encourage you. Not that you don't need a dose of reality, but be careful who you share your vision with.
I say I'm looking for people who are curious by nature and who are aware of the context in which they live and work.
That's great advice there. We're going to turn the tables a little bit on you. We've heard some information about interviewing, and so we got a question to give you all. But before we do that, because you all might start drifting off, can we give one more thanks to our panel?